Welcome back, everyone, to the 40 in Tennessee podcast. I'm Josh, one of your friendly field researchers, here with Houston and Randy. And we make up your field research team down here in McMinnville, Tennessee, even though I'm up here in Boston. Today,
Yankee.
yeah, I'm the Yankee that comes
Yankee
down.
among us.
I get wild looks when I'm down there with you. They're like, who's this long-haired hippie from the north?
It's weird though, because as soon as they find out you're from Boston, they're okay with it.
Yeah, specifically Boston for
It's
some
like it's
reason.
Boston has just shady enough reputation that they're like, oh, awesome. Oh, you're from Boston. It's cool.
Like, it's all Irish and Italians there. Like, oh, okay. Like, today we're gonna get into UAPs, UFOs, sightings like that, but more specifically, because of our area, is the Arnold Air Force Base, right?
We're going straight to it, are we? All right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm laying it out. This is what we're gonna talk about. But we're gonna get into that. So let's start with like some of the first sightings or prevalent sightings that have happened in our area, our research area that pertain to like UAPs, UFOs. Do you know like when the first one ever happened or the first reported one? Honestly,
The southeast, the whole southeast of this area, had a UFO flat back in 1972. There was stuff being seen a lot back in the 70s in this region, but one of the most, well, I say recent, but it's been like 30 something years now.
mm-hmm.
But one of the more modern sightings in this area that's really well known was in January of, I think it was 1995. There was a sighting of a large uh, glowing orb that started in a neighboring county of DeKalb County
Mm-hmm.
and flew its way across DeKalb County, through Warren County, across our main bypass, through our town. And eventually they said people, they're by the time, uh, within the amount of time this was taking to do all this, several state troopers started following it. Several people that were listening to these scanners, police scanners, went out and started following it. The local airport had this thing on radar for a little while, but supposedly this thing went out in towards Irving College, which is like a little area outside of McMinnville.
Yeah.
And the witnesses said it either crashed or it landed in the back of a nursery, and that was the last place it was seen. Was going down in that back of that nursery. I think it's Adcock Nursery, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong on that, but I think it's Adcock Nursery in Irving College.
When was that you said? What
1995, if I'm not mistaken.
95. Okay.
Yeah.
Now just because Tennessee and Tennessee lore, of an incident that was very widely looked at was the Hopkinsville Goblin incident, Hopkinsville, Tennessee.
No, that's Kentucky, actually.
Was that Kentucky? Sorry. I'm gonna get roasted for that one. I forget because I was living in Clarksville at the time when I was living in Tennessee.
Yeah, you weren't far from it at all up in Clarksville.
Yeah, I drove down because like the Bell Witch House was near me as well, and when I found that out, of course, I had to drive by and see that. But also when I found out about the Hopkinsville Goblin case, I was like, Hopkinsville? We got a Hopkinsville, which is right next to me. And then it was like, no, that's it. That's the Hopkinsville. I remember going looking for the farm. I mean, the farmhouse is still there. I couldn't go up to the farmhouse. People are still, own it. I think it's still like owned by that family, possibly. But that's like that was a crazy incident that happened. They reported that something landed and then attacked the house and that they had to defend
multiples,
that. Yeah, there's been multiple like documentaries on YouTube and stuff, little documentaries about it. But there was a lot of police reports from that. The family was like shooting and defending the house. Okay, so they end up tracking on 95. They're tracking this orb all the way across. Now it just ends there. They just tracked it, and it supposedly landed or crashed back behind that orchard.
Yeah, back behind a tree farm. Yeah.
It just always ends there. There's no more reports after. Like,
And you got this kind of conspiracy that's around here. Like we have a local UFO, McMinnville UFO club, and they're of the opinion that it crashed. So you got this kind of conspiracy going that like there's been researchers that's come to McMinnville around about this case, of it being like the southeast Roswell or something crashed, but nothing was ever recovered. If you listen to some of the people that were there that were like in cars watching the thing, they said it looked like it just slowed down and went down. And so to me, it sounds like it more like it landed instead of crashed.
And they said it was just a massive orb.
A massive glowing orb, yeah.
Which is,
but they said that it twice. Once when it was going over our bypass, supposedly, it shot down these blue beams from the orb, and they said that this thing was flying about as fast as a Cessna would.
Okay, which is decent speed.
Decent speed, but not too fast.
Yeah, it's not like a little jet fighter, and it kind of reminds me of the they released the video from Mosul, Iraq, from 2016. They had that orb. You see that silver orb flying over the military base that a drone captured. It was kind of like a lazy, kind of just like right over the top. And when I saw that video, whenever I hear someone talking about an orb, UAP or something, I see it, like I imagine that silver ball just flying through the air, and you're just like, what in the F is that?
Right.
And there's so many reports of that, of just seeing these silver orbs. So
we took a report from a guy that in that same area where this one supposedly went down. This would be like decades later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But there was a guy who came to us, and he was like, how do you guys feel about our gray friends? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, our buddies, our little gray buddies. And I'm like, I've talked to people that have said they've had run-ins with blah.
Mm-hmm.
But I've not personally myself. And so this guy starts opening up, and he ends up talking about that. He says his family have seen these things walk past the windows, these grays. This is all in the same area where this thing supposedly went down years before, right?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing he talked about was that his uncle was in one of the hollows back in the same area, same region. And that while he was up on a ridge where he was hunting, he said a black triangle came rising up out of the hollow, and just took off into the sky.
Black triangles again. Black triangles again.
Yeah. And see, that's what the second thing that I ever saw was a black triangle.
And that was what year is that? That was in the late 90s, right?
No, that was in 2000 and probably 2010.
2010?
Something like that.
Damn.
2010, okay. 2011. 2010 had to be 2010. Yeah.
Damn. It was 2010.
August 20th. I know it was August 20th because it was H.P. Lovecraft's birthday. And we were going to we had just been actually to what is that place? I want to say Showbiz Pizza, but that was the 80s version. Chuck E. Cheese's. We've been to Chuck E. Cheese.
Okay.
For my daughter's birthday, because her birthday was on the 17th. But we didn't get to go until the 20th.
Mm-hmm.
But where we're coming back down the road, we saw this light up ahead, up in the sky. And my ex-wife looks at me right about the time I'm about to say something to her, and she's like, do you notice that? And I'm like, yeah. And it's this weird, really slow light going. It's just getting dusk.
Mm-hmm.
And as we drove up to it, me, her, my daughter, and my son, Gage, all literally got to pile out of the car and watch this thing, big giant black triangle, just go over the road like at a snail pace.
How high above it was? Like how far from you? You're getting out of the car? Like how?
I wouldn't say more than 300 feet.
Jesus. And how big do you think that thing was, though? Like from your?
It was huge. It was big, because as literally we sit there and watch this thing go over, makes no sound at all. I'm literally remember looking at this thing and hearing my son screaming, "Is that what I think it is?" out the back window, and but it's making no sound at all. And as it goes over the trees, and it kind of like goes out of view, two jets come flying up suddenly, and like where they're tracking behind this thing, and this thing dwarfed those jets. I mean, dwarfed them.
Jeez.
But there was a lot at each one of the corners.
Mm-hmm.
But that was it. That was all the lots that were on this thing.
Which has been like
Otherwise, it was just pure black.
a common, like with a lot of videos of those, you always see them like that. You see like the pizza slice with the dots on the little lights at the end.
Yeah.
Where were you at when that happened?
That would have been we'd just gotten off on of exit 111 off of I-24, and had, I don't know what the name. What is that? What is
Summitville?
That? Near Summitville, yes. We were getting just towards Summitville when that happened. Yeah.
I remember when that happened, like you was telling me about that. I thought you said it was in Summitville.
Yeah, it was just before you get to Summitville, yeah.
Jeez. No sound, no nothing. But you
No
guys
sound at
noticed
all.
it. Was there anyone else on the road with you? Were you guys the only ones?
Yes. And I wished I'd have said something to them, because we pulled over, and across the road, somebody else had pulled over and was getting out and looking at the damn thing too. And if I had to do it over, I'd have ran over there and been like, "What's your name? What's your address? What's your phone number?" You know,
like you saw this too.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, I've never had an experience. I've never that I know of like that. I saw something, but they've always fascinated me in that sense, and seeing something like that. See something that massive just kind of drift over. At like what time of day? It was nighttime, right?
It was dusk.
Dusk.
Yeah. There was just enough light in the air still that you could see this, like you could see the thing.
Like the definition of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Enough
you could see it really well.
Was it
couldn't
black?
see what it was made of or anything, but it looked like it was just perfectly black.
Mm.
But the direction that it went in, this gets into what we were talking about earlier. The direction it was going, if you take a map and you point that big giant triangle arrow towards the direction of what's on the map, it was going towards AEDC, which is in Tullahoma and Manchester.
That's the Arnold Air Force Base there, which
Yeah.
they do a lot of engineering research.
Yeah, there's a lot of sightings and stuff like that. A lot in our area gets contributed to that. So that was one thing we wanted to bring up first, where it's almost like a precursor to talk about this UAPs. It's like, hey, an Air Force base in our area that is definitely highly classified. I mean, we knew some stuff that they have going on, but it's like they are for sure, like, how do I word this? Again, we just don't think it's a coincidence that all of the stuff, the sightings are, not involved with this.
Well, I find it's always especially now with the UAP hearings that are like the congressional hearings that have been happening, and if you're not listening to them, you should. If you're listening to this podcast, you should definitely go listen to those. It's just very fascinating with what they're talking about. But they always bring up like, oh, they're always around our military installations and stuff. Yeah. And part of me is always like, well, it's probably us then. It's probably our stuff if it's around that area.
Black projects, yeah.
Probably. Yeah, and I really do think that. I remember as these like more and more of the black triangle sightings were happening, and they've really more increased this past like six years. I want to say there's at least a lot more has been coming out about them. About I want to say 8 years ago, the Air Force kind of showcased their new family of fighter jets, and I think you can find it right on YouTube. That's how I found it. I was like, what the hell? They were kind of doing like the showcase, bringing out all the planes, but like the first time they brought it out, like the first aircraft, it like the doors open and all you see is this thin thing on like wheels, and it wheels out, and I'm like, that's a triangle. I'm like, kind of what I'm like. I think this is like our possibly our new family of fighters that are coming out and they're testing them. Are just these like very sleek, uh, triangular. I don't know what kind of propulsion system there are, but there's just too many reports of them around the Air Force Base, you know. And then when I saw that, I was like, man, that looks very similar.
Yeah.
So
We've been
Yeah,
told by people that worked at AEDC that they've got stuff, you know, down there that they're working on that they can't talk about,
well,
which,
yeah.
you know, duh, because I mean, they work on stuff, you know, involved
Propulsion
with the space
systems and
program and
yeah.
all kinds of stuff down there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Most of the stuff they're like, I can't talk about. It's just national security stuff that they just can't
right.
bring it up, and yeah, that's completely understandable. It's just you got to start looking at like, yep, they're always around there, you know, around these bases, and it's like, wow, it's probably our stuff a little bit more. It's probably more us doing it than it actually possibly like something else coming in.
yeah.
Not saying it's not, because we had to have gotten it from someplace, and there's plenty of reports of UAPs coming to bases and like shutting down stuff. But again, that could be just us doing it too, you know.
What was the model of the plane that like we only know about because it crashed? Like it would probably still be classified, but it was like one of
Probably,
the stealth.
yeah, it was the SR-71 Blackbird, I believe.
Really,
That's
see,
the
that
surveillance
thing
one. I
it still
think that
blows
was
my
one.
mind. Where they say that is still like the fastest that we have, and it's like, okay, that was made in the 50s, so 70 years ago. You don't think we've progressed in
Oh,
our
we definitely
technology
have.
since then?
I mean,
Yeah,
they talk about
yeah,
how DARPA is always 20 years ahead of us. We just don't know it. You know, they just have that tech that they're
right.
working on. That's kind of what they always talk about is that DARPA always has like, yeah, they're 20 years ahead of where we are at currently, and then we slowly get that technology. Um, but yeah, let's talk some more. Let's talk some more incidents. You got any more reports here? So we got 95. We got that mass witnessing. We got some the chase there, people tracking it, and eventually now I guess we get to the point that whether it crashed or landed. Is there any more stuff in the 90s? I have a feeling we have more.
90s, not that I know of. That one is the really big one that really pops out because there's researchers, like I said, have actually come in from out of state to look at our archives up there at the library on for newspaper clippings and things like that, you know, regarding it.
Now, I'll always say this is just like what we talk about when we deal with like doing witness interviews or encounter interviews and such, that the amount of people that don't come forward and say something or report it, there's probably way more people that have seen something that have lived in this area, grew up in this area forever. That's just
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah,
oh, I see those all the time. You know, like
yeah.
we just gotta go ask.
There's a whole history like of sightings of UFOs going up and down the Cumberland Plateau, and but there are people at AEDC that swear up and down that those are flight programs where they're testing stuff, and that because the plateau is so heavily forested, you could be living up there and something go over you, and unless it's making noise, you know, like a fighter, that's you're not going to hear it, or you're not going to even see it probably
It
because
was
there's so much woods up there.
oh, that's what it was. Houston, because it crashed. Now I remember. It was the stealth Black Hawk helicopter that crashed during when they went after Osama bin Laden. That's
I gotcha.
that's the one you're talking about. Actually, we wouldn't have known it existed unless because it crashed during that mission, and it was brought up that like
Right.
they're silent helicopters, guys. You won't
Yeah.
hear them unless they're like right on top of you.
Yeah,
It's like Blue Thunder.
Yeah, like if you think about that, right? Now think about how loud helicopters are. And
Oh
like
yeah.
a lot of like helicopters are just like the massive rotation and wind kicking up, like the tech alone, the engineering alone should just like figure that out. Like how we get this thing that's going to whip these blades so fast, right? No sound though, guys. You know, like you imagine the engineers walking into the room like, we're gonna take a helicopter and we're gonna make it silent. And you imagine everyone in that room going like, how? Like, And then
Going
yeah,
off this project. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of wild
Getting
some of
back
the stuff. Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, getting back to where Randy was talking about, flying over the Cumberland Plateau, like, we would see them. It was probably about 15 years ago now, but you could see certain times of the day they would be like two planes go out. I mean, I'm assuming jets, but they're far off enough where you could see like the trail behind them, but you would always see like one would have like this little like shimmy in it, and within, I don't know, maybe 10 seconds or something, you would hear a sonic boom. And this would happen maybe once a week or something for a couple of years. You would hear this. I mean, that was back, that even back then they would have, it was illegal to have sonic booms. So, I mean, they were testing something up there too. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can see like Tennessee being, of course, it'd be a great place to be able to test stuff. You have a lot of like open area in case you crash. A lot of open area to crash into.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I mean, there's a reason that they put, when they did the Manhattan Project, there's a reason they stuck it in Oak Ridge, just because it was in the middle of nowhere.
yeah,
right.
Uh,
I think I told you guys before where one of my friends was up there at a Stone Door where there's like a huge valley, and he just saw like one of those fighter jets just come down into the valley. Just, I don't know what speed it was going, but like just,
just
jet
Top Gun
coming through.
style through the valley.
Right.
It's just like hell yeah.
danger zone.
Danger zone. Yeah, that's all I'd think of. So look here. Now, how we've never done like a full like gone out and investigated anything like that as a team. We've taken reports, but never like, oh, we're gonna go check out a site. That's never been our
No.
purview. It's like I always said, I came down here for Bigfoot, and now I'm getting like the Yundwit and UAPs and like it's getting.
Did you practice how to say that this week?
I've been practicing it, just like 40 and I've been saying it around the house. I'm like Yundwit just to make sure I say it properly. Just in case one sneaks into my backpack and I bring it home one time. I got one running
You know
around.
what you're dealing with, yeah.
Yeah, just one running around my apartment like a crazy person. And let's talk about this Air Force base. Let's talk about it. Let's get into that. Because I think that's where this all ties into. And do you
You want to start what they officially say, or you
yeah,
want to
let's start
Randy's
with
story?
let's start with what they officially say. I want to know
All right,
what the
I
public
got this
facing
pulled
opinion
up
is.
here. All right, it's Arnold Engineering Development Complex operates more than 68 aerodynamic and propulsion with wind tunnels, rocket and turbine engine test cells, space environmental chambers, arc heaters, ballistic range, and other specialized units. That specifically said it's located in 8 states, so I don't know that we're going to have all of that. Now, what I have always heard is that they do have the wind tunnels there in this one, actual location that we're talking about, that, they would test different birds or different things that are, going up against like the cockpit window to see if they hit this thing at Mach 6. Is it going to,
That's
shatter? So that's what I have heard. There's been some other pieces in the newspaper that talks about like the different programs that they were on. I think they were Apollo program, Gemini. What's the other one? It seems like there was one in between that. Maybe Gemini is the one in
is it
between
Mercury?
that. I believe it was Mercury. And then they do a lot with like defense as well, like the Minuteman projects and Titan and stuff like that, which is just like ICBMs, just like our defense
They just seem
is
like
actually
like a R&D facility for the most part, from what it looks like.
right.
Uh,
Like I said, that specifically right there was from the papers, our local newspaper that actually talked about it recently, because it was like talking about an employment, it
Oh.
was in the business section. But yeah, they've dealt with a lot of different aircraft. As far as, let's see, I just had this.
Is there any like certain aircraft that are like especially ones that kind of are linked to development from there? that
So
we
yeah,
know of?
there's like a long list here, and again, since this one kind of talked about 8 different locations, I don't know if all of these are our local, but I mean, it talks about which the most recent ones that are kind of well known: the F-35, F-22 Raptor,
Yeah.
F-14 Tomcat, um, and again, just all kinds of different probably space tech that I don't know the names for on those.
So it would make sense that any kind of up and coming uh, aeronautics that we have would be going through this place
Yeah.
uh, and potentially being test flown through it, outside or out of it at least.
I did
Um,
see one thing that said that like they can test like the simulate it's like 300 feet above seawater or Mach 20, which is insane to me. But again, I guess if you're using it to leave the atmosphere, that's something you need to test for Mach 20.
Yeah, those type of facilities are pretty wild when they're like, this is the vacuum chamber. This is
Right.
like, how the fuck do you even come up with that? Like, some of the testing that I hear that they do in any military base is always interesting what they try to do. Um, when I was in the military, um, where I went to for my like AIT, my advanced training and stuff, there was a point we did. Um, we got picked out and we got pulled into this like facility for about a day, and it was to test gas masks. And when I found that out, I was like, "Uh-oh, what are they gonna send us in to do?" But what it was is like they put us on gas masks, and we were all hooked up to like tubes into the ceiling on tracks. And in this room was kind of like a course to kind of walk you through. You go up steps, you kind of climb over something. It's very minimum stuff, like very minimum like exertion. But what they told us before going in, they're like, in this room, because it's a sealed room, is that they have like microscopic flakes of fucking like oatmeal. And that's what's coming in through the filter. So what they were testing was like the different shapes of like faces and stuff. And because I have a big freaking nose, I was like on every test because they wanted they wanted to put the mask on me because I have a big nose. Um, but I remember doing it like all day, going into this room and like running through different like just little courses, and there was like a big window with like staff people like monitoring everything. um, and I just remember being like, "What are we doing?" And then, like just to think that like even like very like small testing like that's always happening. And it wasn't until like years later of getting out that I was like, I had no choice. I had to go do that testing. I didn't ask any questions of like, are you guys actually putting oatmeal, or is this something else you're putting in the air? Like,
There
what?
was a guy I worked with at Lowe's, and he has some pretty interesting stories. Like he was an ex-Navy SEAL, but like, dude, most calm, chill person you've ever met.
Yeah.
But he was telling me some of the stuff, back in the '60s and stuff, how he used to, the training that he went through. And there was one where I think they kind of hooked him up to the mask, but
Mm-hmm.
it slowly was like depleting the oxygen. And he said he had like those toys like toddlers have where you put the shapes in and
Yeah.
everything. He's like, they give you that to work on. He's like, what the heck? Like this is simple. And he's like, all of a sudden we start realizing it's like, why isn't this going in?
I can't.
You're just like slowly losing, like his thought.
Yeah, you
Or the
just.
oxygen.
It wasn't until afterwards I was like, they just used me as a human guinea pig. Like I was just, I didn't ask any questions. I was like, oh sure, this makes sense. I mean, it was fine, but it was just like so funny. And it like there was about 20 of us, and I want to say about only 10 of us did the test the whole day. The other 10 like just sat in this other room waiting to hopefully be called on. They just had like a wide variety of people, and they're just like, I just got called every time. I was like, and every time after the second time, I was like, it's because I have a big nose, isn't it? So I mean, like it's not out. They do the testing, throwing the birds at Mach 1 through a windshield. Hopefully it's just a dummy. Like it's not a real bird. There's like, we gotta go catch some Canadian geese to shoot into the wind tunnel.
Well, they probably do.
Oh God,
Probably.
that's so awful. Yeah, let's talk about what's the rumors in Scuttlebutt.
What's that?
What's the rumors in Scuttlebutt about this place? What's the word on the street? What do people talk about?
We have been told by people that have worked down there
Yeah.
that there are tunnels that lead from beneath. Supposedly, a lot of the buildings, or a lot of the. Hush, kitty.
She's telling you to be
If you can
quiet.
hear her,
Like they're gonna get. Cat's like, don't talk. Stop talking, Randy.
Cat's trying to save me.
The FBI is gonna come for us.
Supposedly, a lot of the buildings are underground.
I mean, that makes sense.
So, but there are supposedly tunnels that connect AEDC with Redstone Arsenal in Alabama and go up under the plateau all the way up to Oak Ridge.
That's
Oak Ridge National Labs.
That's some far tunnels.
It'd be about 120 something miles. Yeah. But we've talked to people that have supposedly seen these tunnels, and they're like, you can drive two 18-wheelers past each other in these tunnels.
And that's there's been, I mean, there you can find documentaries on bases that they've done. They show like, yeah, there's whole highway systems under this mountain. I forget the place that I've seen that for. I know there's a couple in America and stuff that they definitely like opened up and showed like the big blast doors on the side of the mountain and just semis pulling in and stuff. And
I always thought it was.
That always fascinates me because it's like someone had to make those.
Yeah.
So, like there's a crew that went in and did that.
One guy that I've talked to, who is a very, very high-ranking government man, or was, he's retired, but he says that they used those nuclear drilling things back in the 60s to start making those things. So that means they would have had the tunnels for, what would that be now, 50, 60 years?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to bring up too. I always thought it was interesting. Like, you got in really good with the folks at the Cumberland Caverns when you were doing like the haunted house there in Halloween season. But they told you, was it back in the 60s or 70s, that they actually drilled to see if that could be used as like a fallout shelter, and found out that it couldn't. It didn't go deep enough.
Wasn't deep
so
enough
it's like,
where it came through. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if it did, we probably wouldn't know about Cumberland Caverns right now. That wouldn't be a tourist destination. That would be something that we would, be talking about on a podcast of like, what's in there? There's tunnels.
And it makes sense because the Cumberland Plateau is like the biggest cave system like in the world, right?
It's one of the ones in North America, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I never knew, and I always bring this up, that like that's what's beneath me when I'm down there. But like until like kind of recently that really like set in, like there's just these massive caverns underneath the area, like all over, like everywhere. Like we go out, just doing our Squatch investigations, and like the caves we find just seemingly appearing and stuff. I mean, the amount of sinkholes that are happening too. Which is what's beneath our feet, people.
We found seismic data back in the 90s. This would have been like 1990.
Yeah, you want to talk about that? You want to tell that little?
Sure. 92, I guess it would be. But it was Labor Day weekend, and myself and a bunch of other guys, a bunch of other kids, we were kids, teenagers.
Yeah.
At the time, went up. We would go up and lay out of school at this old abandoned seismology station that was up on the Cumberland Plateau, and it was called the Cumberland Seismology.
Did you know that at the time, though?
No.
It was
that it was an ex-seismology place?
Right.
Yes.
You knew it was an ex-seismology place at the time.
But only because we've been told that by grown-ups and shit. I didn't know any of the history of it or anything like that.
How'd you find it? Do you knew it was up there and just went up there? Or
we heard about it from some adults and just tracked it down.
Oh, cool.
But if you went about a mile back out in the woods, there was this big abandoned building. I mean, a big building. And about a quarter mile from it was this big giant orb that was just standing off by itself with a little trailer next to it. And where we found that seismic data was in the big building. And we brought it down to one of our teachers, and was asking her, like the teacher, like, what is this? And the teacher had somebody take it to MTSU, which is down in Murfreesboro, to a geologist down there. And long story short, came back to us and told us that there was an immense cave 13 miles deep beneath the plateau. And that this cave was like 3 miles deep by like 4 miles wide. Just a gigantic, think of a gigantic miles wide geode. And that's what this thing sounded like.
What was that movie? The Core? Remember
The
that
Core?
movie? Yeah. They fall into
Yeah.
the giant geode.
But and found out later from all of this that like the crust in the area, the Cumberland Plateau, was actually thicker than almost any other place on the crust. Like it's 50 miles thick in this region, where in most of the area it's like between 14 to 20 miles thick. So it's exceptionally thick here, which would mean those caves go God knows how deep.
Yeah. They go down. They go down far. What could be down there?
Yeah. But since we're talking about UFOs though, on the topic of where we found the seismology data.
Yeah.
A couple of months later, we went down to the orb, and one of our friends noticed that the orb had this like red phone that was still plugged up, he picked it up, started ringing, hung it up, and we're a bunch of juvenile delinquents. We were like, what's in that
in the trailer, right?
The trailer next to the orb. So we pried it open with a crowbar, and there were 3 computers in there, each one of them saying Earth Station 1. Now, at the time, I couldn't tell you what the hell Earth Station 1 was, what that meant.
Okay, teenage Randy, though, at that time, when you saw Earth Station 1, what was your first?
I'm thinking I found like Area 51 or
you're like,
shit,
I found it.
I mean?
I did it.
But years later, we found out what Earth Station 1 was, and it was actually a seismology. It was a government program that was working with the seismology station that was up there, and it was monitoring atomic blasts in the Soviet Union through the crust.
Oh, and I'm assuming that because it would like resonate through the caves, like that type of vibration.
Probably ring through these caves.
Yeah. And they can that makes a lot of sense. That's just so it's so. I remember when you first told me that story, and it was like it's just up in the middle of nowhere. It's just like up in the middle of these. But like this is it's like the Cumberland Plateau is so freaking unique.
Well, back in the day, all of this, the Cumberland Plateau, that whole area up there was all owned by the government. Like in World War II, there wasn't hardly any private ownership up on the plateau. It was all government. They used it for ordnance training primarily. And the area of Rocky River, the Gulf there has so many cliffs that they actually, some of the guys that stormed the beaches of Normandy trained there in Rocky River for their beach assault, where they're having to go up the cliffs.
Oh yeah, because it was similar.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting piece of history. Dang.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah,
your friend picked up that phone, and he hung up that phone. Then what?
It started ringing. As soon as he picked it up, it started ringing.
And then you guys took off, right?
Yeah. We took off that day because we got freaked out by, we're like, who the hell? Why would there be a phone that's still working up here? This place had already been condemned. It already been
shut
pretty
down.
much abandoned. It was still government land, but no one was going up there. It was the buildings were abandoned. At least so we thought.
Yeah.
When we actually came back.
Now the main building was abandoned, right? You were saying that the big main building was abandoned. That's where you get
yeah.
And then there was the trailer with the computer.
The trailer with the orb, yeah.
Yeah.
And so like when we broke into the trailer, we actually went up there on Labor Day weekend, and specifically with the intent of we're going to break in the trailer and see what's in the trailer.
Because you guys saw that the electric meter was running, right?
Yeah.
That was a big indicator. You're
On
like,
the
wait,
orb.
there's power here.
On the orb, I mean, it was like this. It was spinning. And we made jokes about it being government waste. That this place is still running, even though this place is not even supposed to be open anymore. And so when we bust into the that trailer and see those computers, we freak out
Yeah.
because we're like, those aren't supposed to be
Yeah,
here.
you're
So
like,
we
oh, I'm
leave.
not supposed to be here right now.
Yeah, so we leave. But we come back about a week later, and we end up talking one of our chick friends at school who was like the closest thing we had to a hacker back then, right? She was just really good with computers. That just means she was good with computers. That
Yeah,
doesn't mean she
yeah.
actually hack
Yeah,
anything.
she knew how to like
So
do some command prompts.
pretty much, yeah. So we talked her into laying out of school to go with us up there, break into this thing again. She gets in there, starts to type, and as soon as she starts to type, every one of the computers goes
Just like in the
off.
movies, just
off. And so we're like, shit, get in the car. So we got back in the car, started to leave, and it's like a mile back there to where we had to park. And it's like a 1/4-mile hike to get to this orb. So we get on the main highway. And after we get on the main highway, there's a van that just comes around the corner. There's this corner there in the road, like right when you get on the main highway. Just get on it. Here comes this van just barreling around this corner in the road. And in our rearview mirror, I see him slow down, stop, turn, and go down the road we just came down. And so somebody is trying to beat feet back to where we just were in what looks like a government van. So we drive down the road to where there used to be this little old mountaintop grocery kind of place.
Mm-hmm.
And you could like buy sandwiches there, right? So we pull in and go in there and get some sandwiches. And we're like standing outside eating our sandwiches. It's like 20 minutes, 30 minutes later at this table outside this little mountaintop cafe. And here comes the van. And the van slows down. And the guy driving literally like turns and just mean mugs us.
He knows it was you. He saw you guys.
Slows down and mean mugs us, and then starts to drive again. And so we all jump in my car. And we're like, "Fuck this! If he's gonna mean mug us for whatever, if he knows what we've done, we need to see where he's gonna go." So we get in the car, take in after him. By the time we get to the bottom of the mountain, we finally catch up with him, and we follow this guy all the way back into McMinnville to where the old police station is. And this guy pulls into the police station parking lot. And we're like, we're all going to jail. Like we all think
we
we're
followed
going to
him
jail.
there.
We broke into the wrong thing. This guy goes all the way through the parking lot, pulls out the other side of the parking lot. We're still following him. Pulls back onto the road, ends up, long story short, going to like down the highway like he's leaving town.
He knew you were following him.
Yeah, he knew we were following him. So like, but he wanted to scare us. He wanted to make us think we're going to jail, but like he didn't pull the trigger. Why? What was he hiding up there that he didn't want the cops to ask questions about?
Yeah. If there was a break-in, why didn't you report it to us or something? Like.
Yeah, so he wanted to scare the shit out of us, and he did. He scared the shit out of us. Like we were like, we're all going to we're going to get assassinated in our sleep.
Did he just look like he was? You could only see his head or something like that. He didn't like. Could you see a uniform or anything?
Looked like a dude in a coveralls, man. He's wearing a cap.
That wasn't the only time you've seen that, though, right? Like, don't you call it it's the blue suits or the blue van?
The blue vans, yeah.
Yeah.
The blue suits and the vans, yeah.
Yeah. Didn't you run into him one other time?
I've seen that van go through Warren County like multiple times, and they've always got government tags, and it's always a guy wearing a blue coveralls. They look like this guy was, and a cap, and a government van, white government van.
Huh.
But like the question is, where did he come from? Because we had only been there. Like I said, you had to where we parked. You had to hike the last 1/4 mile to where that orb was.
Mm-hmm.
So we were all kids, so it didn't take long to hike that at all.
Yeah.
So we had maybe been there 10 minutes by the time she had touched those keys and the computers turned off. And by the time we got back to the car and on the main road, another maybe 10 minutes. But we were running. We ran to that car. So within, say, 5 minutes and another 5 minutes to get out on the main highway, like, here comes this van. Where the hell did he come from?
Yeah. Because there's nothing else nearby. He would have to.
Unless, here's
Go ahead. Yes.
Unless he came up
Yes.
through one of the tunnels that's under the friggin' plateau. And the reason we bring this up is one of the times that we came in contact with these vans again, we were going down a one-way road that ends, it's an urban college, Dry Creek Gulf Road. We were near the end of that road. And then 5 of these vans goes, zoo, 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 and passes our car. There is nothing on that road. Nothing but woods. And yet here comes these vans out of nowhere, beating feet.
Yeah.
From the end of the road.
Like, where the fuck were you guys? And is that at the base of one of the mountains, or?
Yes. Yeah.
It's one of those. Now, has there any, like, we talk about, like, archaeology and on here, and we have a local archaeologist we work with. Is there any archaeological stuff that kind of connects to any of this, with UFOs in the area?
There are supposedly pictoglyphs in some caves that look sort of similar to the ant people of the Southwest, which look like aliens.
Yeah. And I mentioned it. I think it was either on the first or second podcast. It was I think it was you and one of the other guys had stopped and talked to an older lady, and she had. Actually, no, it was another thing. You guys went to some place, and there was a. Was it the star chart? I don't even know if
the map stone.
Yeah, the map stone. In the area. I mean, that goes more on the archaeology side than the UAP side that we know of, but I mean, it was a star chart. From what I could tell from the photos that you had taken of it and what you guys described. It's very interesting, some of the stuff, and like a lot of this info kind of really lines up. It starts really making a lot of sense. So I mean, I can see them having those big tunnels moving through, but like, what else? I mean, they talk about what was the base that they had the shootout? I always say it wrong.
Dulce,
that's what it was.
Dulce, yeah.
Now I know the
Dulce,
guy. Yeah, now I know the guy that like wrote the book about that incident has kind of been. I don't know what his credibility really is, but then again, like,
he's dead now. He's dead.
Yeah. Oh, when did he pass away?
He died several years back. Yeah.
Okay. I remember watching a bunch of those, like his reports on that, like his conferences on that base, and that was they were digging to build a base, and they stumbled upon another underground base, right?
It was already there.
Yeah, there was an alien base already there, and a shootout ensued. And the Cumberland Plateau is so massive, like. Again, like I always say this, it's like once you go down there, it's just like the scope and the scale of things. Like you really understand like how tiny we are in the area and how much land and space there is down there. That things can hide.
I've wondered, man. Like especially with the if the black triangles are not ours. I think that the black triangle that I saw probably was a black project, of some sort. But if they're not ours, let's say that they're not. The guy that said that he saw the one coming up out of the Rocky River Gorge, just coming up out of the gorge and then going up into the sky. Rocky River Gorge is literally right above, if you go, straight down 13 miles, that giant cavern that we know is down there. What could you do if you were an advanced species? What could you do with a space that's, 4 miles by 3 miles, basically a giant geode opening, 13 miles down? Like that's impenetrable.
Yeah.
Nothing can get to it.
Yeah, like stupid humans can't get to us. We can fly right down there, and whatever tech they have, they can get to it. And that seems like a big enough area you can store some crafts, You know, if it's 3 miles by 4 miles, that's a big space to be able to do what you need or just have a location for yourself. I mean,
What was the story with the guy that we went? Is it past Cookville, going towards Knoxville, that talked about something coming up out of the water there?
Oh yeah, yeah.
oh,
We actually went out. We went out to a Bigfoot sighting that he had. Well, he didn't have a sighting. He had uh, vocalizations.
oh, nice.
But we went out to where he actually had the encounter. And as we were driving back, he was like, "What do you guys think about UFOs?" And we're like, "What about them?"
You're like,
And
what do
he's
you
like,
think?
"Well," he's like, "Me and my brother were fishing out on Dale Hollow Lake, and he said that there was these 7 glowing orbs that passed underneath our boat, and then after it got about 100 yards past our boat, just bloosh, bloosh, right out of the water, and ascended up into the sky."
And
And
that's been the big reports now is the amount of like the transmedium crafts.
coming out of the water, yeah.
I mean those lakes can connect to underground tunnels and, you know, or even they're just hiding down there. And where is that in conjunction to like that's nearby then, right?
Where we are, it's about 2 hours drive, 2 hour drive from where we are.
Dang.
Maybe 100
We will
miles.
travel to,
I know.
come see this stuff.
You guys do travel a lot for a lot of these interviews. I will say that. You guys have no problem trying to get out to a location. That's just it's so interesting. And because you know with the subject matter, there's not enough information. It's so much like just trying to piece together like encounters and you know eyewitness encounters and all that, and just like theorize what the hell's going on. And it's just so fascinating. It's so fascinating, and that area down in McMinnville is just so fascinating, so interesting. Was there any more like mass sightings in this area?
I've talked to a gentleman that him and his grandmother and his mother, so there's like 3 generations at once. They all said they saw 6. They called it a fleet, but 6 of these giant cylindrical crafts. This would have been near the Lucky community of Warren County. But said 6 of these things just taking up the night sky.
Here's my question for the group. Why okay, if they're so like why are they always just these basic shapes? Just a triangle, you know, a sphere, a fucking like capsule. You know, we grew up with sci-fi, right? And always just imagined
With the Millennium Falcon,
just something cool looking, you know?
Yeah,
And, like it's just like here's a ball, and like it's a tic tac, or it's just a triangle, you know? And I've always just been like, is it just because either it's just such advanced, you know, like it's an advanced species, and they're like we don't care about like looking cool. It's just like what works. Just like we just got to put this in a ball. Like
simplicity's sake.
Yeah, very simplistic aesthetic. But that's where I start to question, like, are we making it? But then, like, if you start to look at the aesthetic, like the Cybertruck, like, you know, it's very out of the. It's very jarring to see in the wild. You guys seen them, right? Just like, just driving, you're like, oh Jesus.
They look like a bear dumpster.
Yeah, they do.
That's what they look like.
There's been a lot of reports. People have found raccoons trying to break into it because they think it's a dumpster. So there's people are finding like raccoon hand marks on the trunk part.
You have heard Elon Musk talk about like why his ship is pointy, right?
No.
Yeah, it's because of Borat. Have you seen Borat?
Oh, because it has to be pointy.
It's literally he done that because the Borat movie. He's like, that's not necessary.
It's not. There's you know, you're not needing aerodynamics in space, really, I guess. And I guess that's part of it too. It's just like, yeah, we just gotta put it in a enclosed thing. But I also view it as like, if it's us making it, I always imagine there has to be some form of flare, just because that's what humans do. Everyone, even if it's just some engineer or somebody, it's just like they always got to put their mark on it in some way. I've been imagining, I'm like, why haven't, yeah, where's the Millennium Falcon? Where's something like interesting? And now there are the UAP like reports or where they look like the jellyfish. They look like really amorphous.
Yeah.
And
What was the
That makes me
other?
wonder if we're even dealing with a ship at that point, and we're not dealing with some sort of life form we just don't understand.
that can just operate in the vacuum and travel on its own, or
Yeah.
and yeah, that's what were you saying, Houston?
Randy, you had one other sighting like way back when, and you talked about like the melting look off the bottom, right?
Yeah. When I 1993, late November of 1993, my wife at the time had left her purse at a restaurant, so I had went back to go get it. And there's a big hill you have to go up to drive up to get to where this was. And as I was driving up the hill, I noticed a light off the side, and it was strangely, all slow and weird and kind of doing this up in the sky, up in the air. And I thought, because I delivered pizzas at the time, I'm like, I know how to get there. Like, I know what through streets to hit to kind of
Yeah, the back
end up
roads.
where it looks like it's at. So I did that, and I came out right under this damn thing, and it looked like a big rectangle. Uh, not to get back into like the simplicity of it, but it
Yeah.
looked like a big rectangle. Didn't have any kind of lights, and it looked like a big metal rectangle. But the bottom of it looked like it was trying to melt, and I say trying because like it looked like it wanted to,
Like it was dripping almost.
almost like it wanted to drip, but it never did.
So it was
Like
just
it would
kind of.
almost like it would get to that point and then just kind of amorphously go back into itself. But the whole
Huh.
bottom of this thing was doing that.
I wonder if that's some like gravity distortion, and it has
Yeah.
to be. It has to be. Like,
T1000.
And
yeah.
I've wondered ever since then, if this was again something from AEDC or
I mean-
something, something of our own that just happened to catch.
And there was a lot of talk recently. I mean, in a lot of the documentaries coming out, especially like Stephen Greer and Jeremy Corbell and stuff, and George Knapp talking about like metals, these meta metals, being discovered, or figured out, or trying to come up with these new techniques. And a lot of these UFOs, if there's been like crash retrieval or any reports of some like debris, a big thing that they find is like it's usually pure aluminum, and like pure aluminum has some wild properties from what they talk about.
Yeah, electromagnetic.
Yeah, and that's a big thing that they say is like no, it's like a lot of this stuff is like this just pure aluminum, which is not the easiest thing to get. So if there's some weird refinement that they're doing.
Do you remember Art's Parts from Art Bell?
Yes.
Where someone actually sent in, what was supposed to be parts of the Roswell crash,
Yeah.
and they had that, looked at, and supposedly there was layers of metal stacked on top of each other that was so thin that they still don't exactly understand how it was. It looks like it was grown together, basically, or what we might now think of as like printed. So
I remember back in the 90s, it was like the late 90s, there was like a made-for-TV movie. It was really well done, but it was about Roswell, and it was like a drama. And they went through a bunch of, like, kind of what happened, right? Or what they theorized that happened. And I remember that because there's the talk about, like, one of the sheriff and his family, like he had taken some parts back to his house, and I'm probably butchering some of this story of who it was. And the kid in it talks about how he had a piece of it, and there's been lots of reports of that. Well, in the movie, they talk about like the dad like cutting it or trying to like fold up the metal, and it just goes back to itself. It would self-repair itself.
Mhm.
Now, I remember that from the 90s as a kid. I remember being like, I don't know, I forget how old I was. I remember being at my grandparents' house and watching it. It was like a really good movie. If anyone knows what the title of that freaking movie was, I forget what channel it was on, or it was probably USA. I forget what the name of it was. But eventually they show like an Air Force base and they have one of the Greys. Like, they kind of started like later on when I learned about like Project Crystal Night and all that. I was like, oh, that kind of lines up with that report. So years later, when I was in high school, my neighbor came by, an older guy, and he was one of those guys who just, he knows everyone in the town. He has tons of friends. A very personable guy, knows a lot of guys. So he'd come by every day. He was an older guy, come by and chit chat. And he came by this one day just to show us this one thing. And he had this like piece of metal. It was like almost looked like a copper wiring, almost like a thick copper wiring. And he was like, check out what this is. My buddy, who's an engineer, has, brought, is working on this and developing this new metal thing for like medical stuff. And I'm like, what does it do? And my mom's in the kitchen and stuff. He's like, he gets a glass of water and he just fills it with tap water. He takes it and he wraps it around his finger like real tight, and he pulls it off and he drops it in the water, and the thing just straightens itself back out. Like, reacts. And now this could be just something someone would be like, oh, that's a simple thing. I don't know, but like, it's been recently I was thinking about that, but then thinking about that documentary and watching all these UFO, and they talk about these metametals and stuff, and I'm like, huh, did I see one, like some form of this in some way? Like, and he did. He would wrap it up, or he would tie it in like a bow, and he'd drop it in there, and it would undo itself. And what they say they were using it for was like being able to curl it up, and like in like any like clogged arteries, being able to put it in there and activating it, and it could, help unclog an artery or a vein or something like that. They can get this wire really thin and, do some medical procedures. And he was telling me that they can make it so it wouldn't just go straight. They could have it always go back to a certain shape with like using the water or some kind of chemical reaction with it. But then like, again, like I've been watching these documentaries a lot recently again, and they always bring up that kid and the family and how they interacted with that material. And then I was like, I saw something like that when I was younger, like in high school too. And like just now, I kind of like have been connecting those dots. I'm like, maybe I've seen some form of that.
Yeah.
It's just so.
I think that was Major Martell's son.
Yep.
That's referring to. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of wild, some of the stuff, and like it's just so piecemealed, and how much like when the Roswell crash happened, I mean, the news media came out, and even the Air Force came out and was like, alien ship crash, like spaceship crash.
Yeah.
And then
Flying
it was like,
saucer.
yeah, everything. Like it was like, and then they were like, nope.
Disc.
And then it was like weather balloon. Like the next like 2 days later. And if you see some of the photos from that crash site from when it happened, it's like that wasn't a weather balloon. That was something way bigger than a weather balloon. It's just like you could see the photo of just like a ton of debris just everywhere. Do you think that'll ever get disclosed? I hope they do. I hope they disclose that eventually and just like, hey guys, sorry.
I think if any administration is actually ever going to disclose, it will be the one that's coming in right now.
I think so too. Honestly. I hope so. I hope we get some.
He did at the end of Rogan the other day on his episode say that like it's about time to release the JFK, which I mean he said that his last administration, but he made a point to say again, he's like, I think it's time. So
yeah, I remember him mentioning like why he wasn't able to last time. There was like a valid reason or something. I did hear something that he was like, I wanted to, but I couldn't. There was something that happened.
Yeah, I think it was something about still like family members remaining alive or something, but I don't know if that was, part of the. I
mean, RFK's in his cabinet now, so we'll see what happens. I know he's kind of been pushing for it, and I think there's a lot of people that kind of want to know. But we in the last 2 cryptid cons that we've done, our end roundtable discussion that we've done, especially the first year, there was a big, long talk about disclosure. That was a big question from the audience for our guests was, do you guys think disclosure is coming? And like everyone's like, yeah. And a lot of the general consensus is like, it feels like we're ramping up for it, like an actual full disclosure in some sense, or at least they're disseminating it. I mean, Lou Elizondo was just on the last congressional hearing. I recognized some of the other guys, but like I didn't really know. Like I've seen some of their stuff, and one of the guys bringing up, he's like, "Yeah, you can request information, but all you get is this paper, and it's just like he has it all. It's all redacted." He goes, "What is this?" He's like, "How do you?" like,
Yeah, I think what we're actually seeing is a soft disclosure.
Yeah.
I think with Lou Elizondo and all them, they're being allowed to say the things that they're saying to kind of gauge, how the populace is going to,
I think the
react.
population's very interested and like wants to know at least. It's like having that unanswered question forever, and you're just like, can you just give me? I think a lot of people are just at this time just like, can you just tell us? Can you just?
I think at this point, people are just like, they're tired of listening to the hearings. It's like, dude, just tell us yes or no. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, because a lot of it, and I know this last hearing they were talking about like a lot of the questioning. They were trying to show the public like how much red tape there is because of, hey, I can tell you, but I have to be in a skiff, all right? This needs to, like, I can disclose this, just not here. I can disclose that, but just not here. And it's like, I know the people on Congress that were running the panel were very much just like, hey, we're saying these questions knowing that we're going to get that type of answer, but we want the public to understand what's happening and like kind of that process of like trying to get this disclosure. It feels like they're trying to keep frustrations down a bit. If that makes sense. Just trying to explain that. And I get it. There's a lot of like national security risks at this because they probably have to make sure whatever they're researching, it's never nothing in the government's ever like just, hey, this is just quarantined off. It's probably connected to 20 other things, departments and all that they're like, they don't want to know. So they're probably trying to figure out, how do we tell people?
So what are the odds in the next 4 years it's just dropped in a tweet by Trump?
The aliens are here. They're great. Like, I mean, it's possible. That's the funny part is like, that's in the realm of possibility now. Like,
yeah.
Is that's how it could come out. And like, I think, with them talking about so much like, hey, we have all this high def stuff. The stuff that's put out is like dumbed down. So it's not showing too much, but showing capabilities. It's frustrating. I just want the answer.
Do you believe them when they are saying they don't know though? Like, are they the...
Yeah, I think that's their most honest answers. Because when
I
they're like,
believe it's a little bit of both. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a bigger part of this is that they don't know, and I think that's harder for them to even say, because of a lot of people like, you're putting how much money into this. Like, well, that's the issue. Is like we still haven't figured it out, and maybe our understanding isn't there yet still, and it takes time to experiment.
Yeah.
And fuck with us. I mean, I always like the theory that they are intentionally crashing stuff here for us to find and try to reverse engineer. Like, I've always liked that theory, though. They're just like, hey, just send a probe over there, see if they can figure this out, like.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that they do know some things very well.
Oh, they must. They must.
Like, they know the reality of there's things flying around in our atmosphere that aren't ours. They've brought them down several times. They've retrieved the crashes, so they would know that this thing exists. Maybe even that this thing is the biological thing that drives this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that they know jack shit about what the hell this thing came from, where it come from, when it came from, how it made that thing to get here from there to here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that a lot of it is I don't think that the government really knows as much as we X-Files has given us the idea that they do know. I think they may be a lot in the dark a lot.
And I think that's why they're trying to keep it so much of it, like, because they don't know. So they don't even want to theorize anything, because then it might.
And it looks embarrassing because after since Roswell
long.
happened nearly 80 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
If Roswell really happened, and they've known for a fact that at least one species lives out there,
Yeah.
That's embarrassing. After 80 years, and they still don't really know like the details.
I always try to imagine, though, also that, like, if these species are so advanced, right? It's gonna take us a while to figure them out, or try to understand what the hell they are and how they operate, or how they view the universe and stuff, and how they view us. But I also realize this, that if they're that advanced, they've been around for a long time, right? So that means there was a point. There was 3 aliens just like us going, are there other aliens out there? There was a point in their civilization that they were just like us doing this. Being like, is there someone out there? I think there's more people out there. There might be more people out there. and then like part of the population was like, no, there's nothing out there. It's just us. Like, I always try to put that in my head. I was like, there's a point this advanced species was just like us trying to figure out everything.
Arguing about Bigfoot and little people.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what do they have on their planet? That's what I want to know. Like, what's their folklore? Yeah. You guys got anything else you want to finish up with?
No, like I said, I think that just trying to tie a lot of this stuff to AEDC too. Like we wanted to throw that out there to where, again, a lot of local stuff around here is like, that kind of fits to what
Yeah,
we've been told.
I don't think we could have that talk first without having a conversation about AEDC and kind of.
No, I agree. Yeah, and I feel like we could have, we'll probably come back around to this subject again on another episode.
Right.
It definitely kind of opened up a little bit of a rabbit hole for me to look into, think about.
Yeah, because me and you, I mean, we don't have any experience with that. Like I've never seen anything. You said you haven't. Like again,
yeah, that I know of. That's the other thing, is sometimes I'm just like, it's like sometimes you're like, you just gotta look up. You gotta look up and just like notice some stuff. Yeah, I've always, but since I was a kid, I was like, man, I hope I see one. I want to see one. Same with Bigfoot. It's just like, I want to see one. I want to see something. Yeah, man. Well, I think that's we'll wrap it up for this episode, everyone. We'll be back at you here soon. The new episode. I don't know what we're going to be talking about next episode. Oh. Forbidden archaeology.
Oh, okay.
That is the subject matter we're going to get into. We're going to get into some forbidden archaeology in our area. That'll be fun. We get into folklore and stuff.
Yeah, we have been listing our email at the end of the episode to get in touch with us. So, like, if you have seen anything Bigfoot, alien related, like I said, me and Randy will come out.
Yeah. If you're in
Josh
that
may
area,
fly.
I might. If it's I might fly down for it. But if you have stories, you have questions for us, you want to, or even discussion points, please submit them through the email, and we'll get back to you, and we'll talk about it on here. It'd be great. But yeah, thank you guys for another great episode, and catch everyone next week when we come back out with another episode. Have a good night, guys.
See ya.